are we doing as a church? What do you think? We want your thoughts on Canyon View. Go to canyonviewchurch.com and click on the survey button. We're asking everyone to participate because every voice counts. So, log on to canyonviewchurch.com to take the CBVC 2010 All Church Survey.
This year's Whiteout was excellent. We had baptisms. In fact, we had 11 baptisms. We had students that were just fully engaged in what the speaker was talking about, our speaker Ken was talking about. We had kids on their knees, we had kids raising their hands in the air. In fact, I think I did minimal praying that day, which was quite odd. I think I prayed for maybe 2, maybe 3 people where God was asking me to call to, but every single student in that room was praying for other students. They were huddling together, they were crying together, they were just experiencing God together. And it was the coolest thing that I think I've experienced. And I think at that moment, that's when I realized that this is what church was created for. This is what church should be. And it was the neatest thing because I was like, boy, if this continues, I'm out of a job, which would be the greatest thing since sliced bread, because everybody working together for the cause of Christ, loving on each other. It was amazing. We had so many students just letting go of shame, hurt, brokenness that was in their lives, and just releasing that and just calling out to God and them being touched by Him and just wanting to move forward, knowing that this isn't going to be just an overnight process, that this is going to be a long process, but they know their life was touched by Jesus and now they want to move forward with Him. We're definitely excited for next year. In fact, we had over 530 students there, and we are trying to think about maybe we need to look into a bigger facility because we have so many students who want to come to Whiteout.
I can do this. Okay. Well, this is a great evening and a great weekend, and I'm excited for what's happening here. And one of the 5 Vineyard values that we have is reconciling communities. And when I came here, one of our pastors that used to be executive pastor, he actually started children's pastor, and then he moved on to be executive pastor, and his wife Marilyn was like the queen of children's ministry. And about 4 years ago, the Lord moved them on to start Wellspring Church up in Battlement Mesa. And so when I came here, I wanted to continue to develop relationship with Dave. And so Dave and I and some other pastors have been meeting periodically for coffee and just to encourage each other. And I just had this wild idea. I said, Dave, why don't you come preach at our church? And I think it will be one of those times that will be healing for all of us. And I feel like what's happening this weekend is one of those cornerstones where we as a church and as a community together can move on in the love of Christ. And so Dave, for those who don't know this, was here on staff for about 14 years, right, Dave? And Marilyn too. And you see their fingerprints all over this church. And I really felt that this was very important for us to do, to have Dave to come and be able to just share the word with us. And so I don't want to take his time, and I want you guys to give a great welcoming applause and thank you for Dave and Marilyn for them being here.
I just got to breathe. Thank you, Kirk. What he didn't tell you, he's been trying to get me to come for about a year. And he asked me the first time, and I said, let me think about it. No. But he stayed persistent and stayed after it. And finally, one day he says, Dave, we just want you to come because we just want to bless you and Marilyn. And, we want some healing to take place. And I was like, gosh, why'd you say it like that? How can I say no to that? And so here I am. I really wasn't real sure what happened to me when I walked up here. It's been a little over 3 years since I stood in this place. I didn't know that I ever would stand here again, and here I am. I want to thank the Band of Brothers. One of them recently said, Dave, we knew that if you hung out with us long enough, we'd bring you down to our level. I took it as a compliment because these are the best folks in the world. And every single one of these brothers have landed such a great place in my heart. So I'm thankful that you're here. Thank you. And it's just so good to see so many of you that we haven't seen for a long time. We experienced basically pretty much a miracle tonight because I think everybody that came up and said hi to me, I actually could remember their names. I think 100%. I hit it every single time, and you have no idea what a miracle that is. Kind of like I just was telling Dave and Patty Ward, there is a God. We just experienced him in my remembering that. I want to begin this evening with a story. It's about a woman. Her name is Shula Cohen, and she lived in what was Palestine, now Israel, back just after the war. And she's a teenager. She's 15, 16 years old. And one day her father brings home a man who's twice her age, and he introduces her to this man. And all of a sudden, the dad is encouraging Shula to take this man into town somewhere and do something. When they get back, there is a bunch of family there. There's all kinds of people there. It looks for sure like there is a party that is being ready to take place. And so Shula had no idea what was going on. She finally found her mom and asked what was going on. She goes, oh, Shula, today your father is announcing your engagement. And she was devastated. Her father had done two things wrong. One was he had broken Jewish law by not first speaking with her. Secondly, the man was not a Hebrew. He was an Arab from Lebanon, twice her age. And so the wedding took place. She was moved off to Lebanon. This man was actually a good man. He was wealthy, well-to-do in Lebanon. He was connected in high places. And so as a result of that, Shula then became connected to high places and became a personal friend to the prime minister of Lebanon. This is in the mid to late 40s. At a party where only the high and the elite of Lebanon were at, Shula began and just accidentally overheard two generals talking about a planned attack that they were working on Israel, her homeland. She was torn. What should she do? She decided to, in some kind of a real secretive way, she took ink that was like invisible ink. She remembered in some kind of class how to make that. She wrote out a note and somehow got it to her cousin that was still living in Israel. As a result of that, she was contacted by the Israeli Mossad. If you know what that is the Israeli counterpart to like our CIA. And at that point, they then recruited her to become a spy for Israel as she lived in Lebanon. That went on for a little while. She finally was discovered and caught and then brought into court. And at that point, with the courage that was beyond most, endured tremendous hardship, brutality, and torture. They would literally, in public court, try to get her to admit and to give her sources away. She would not break down. She would not say anything. They pulled fingernails right out of her hands and out of her feet, hung her upside down in court publicly, pretty much took most of her clothes off and whipped her and beat her. And then she says in her interview, and did things that she dare not tell. It was so bad. She was finally sentenced to be hung, to die by hanging. Her husband, because he was someone of influence, was managed to bribe enough high officials to get that sentence turned from hanging to a life sentence in prison. She says, fortunately for her, because of the Six-Day War that took place in 1967, at the end of that Six-Day War, the Lebanese people had captured one of the Israeli pilots, and they had him. And so the Jewish government then went into negotiations to get this pilot back. And what really grabbed my heart, and what I hope grabs yours tonight, is the way she said it. As she's talking about how the negotiations are going, and they wanted this pilot, she says it like this: and Israel remembered Shula Cohen. And so Israel then was also asking for this older woman now, who was basically rotting away in a prison, to be released with this Israeli pilot. The trade was 496 prisoners that the Israelis had for two people, a jet pilot and Shula Cohen. The reason I'm wanting to share this story with you, what I want you to get is, the moment I heard that, it just so grabbed my heart, because it was like, that's the word that the body of Christ needs to hear in America for sure. That we have a God who has not abandoned us. We have a God who loves us. He has never taken his eye off of us, and he will remember, and he will come through for us when we need him to come through for us. Now, I don't know about you, but I think we're living in some exciting days. I believe that the men and women of the Bible wish they could be alive today, because what we have going on in our times, they wrote about. And I just think they wish they could really be here right now. Now, to be sure, these are times that aren't without their problems. Economic decline, plenty of moral decline. I think some of the natural disasters our country has experienced, and others that have taken place beyond our country, such as Katrina and the Gulf storms, and of course the recent tragedy of Haiti, are kind of a picture of the upheaval that is taking place in many, many lives, and maybe even some of you here today. Some of you are struggling because of the economic downturn that we've been in. Some of you are just really wondering what even tomorrow might look like in so many ways. I think a mistake we make in times of difficulty is that we let the crisis play with our heads. We get depressed and we get fearful, and then we start wondering and doubting the future. I think another mistake that we make in trying times is we tend to react rather than respond. For example, companies in times of economic downturn lay off employees in the attempt to cut back and save on expenses, and in doing so, let loose of their most important resources. When we are facing tough times, we need to make sure that we maintain our faith, that we don't panic, that we don't give in to despair, and absolutely do not overreact. But here's the real question. What kind of shape will you be in when the storm has passed? Will you be emotionally devastated, resentful, angry? Will you find yourself bitter? Or will you emerge from this enthusiastic, full of joy and triumphant? Will your faith in God disappear, or will it become stronger than ever before? Will you endure to the end, or will you just simply throw in the towel? Today we're going to look at Psalm chapter 20. So if you have your Bibles, open them up to Psalm 20. And there's some verses here that will really speak to this issue, and I hope that will encourage us. Some of these verses in Psalm 20, I think, things that we need to hear, things that we need to know, things that we need to apply during difficult times. Psalm 20 was probably written on the occasion of David and his army about to go into battle. And most probably with the Ammonites, which is modern-day Jordan, and the Syrians, which is still Syria, who came with great numbers and horses and chariots to fight against David at that point. And you can read all about that in 2 Samuel chapter 10, also in 1 Chronicles 19. The tone of the psalm, as it relates to us, is when you are about to be face to face with danger, we can trust God to see us through. Here are some of the things, and here's why I think why. First of all, we are to remain hopeful. Why? Because support is on its way. My wife is a great big fan of John Wayne. In fact, I think I live in the shadow of John Wayne. You know, in fact, at Christmas time, our son, he didn't help me any. He bought her a DVD that had 4 of his movies on it. And so guess what we were watching right after Christmas? But, you know, what I really love about that is, and you've seen all the old Westerns when somebody's in trouble, and here comes John Wayne with the cavalry. The trumpet is blowing, and he's coming to the rescue, right? The cavalry is showing up. Support is on its way. And because of that, we can and should and ought to remain hopeful. I think as David is preparing to go into this battle, there is no doubt in his mind that hope should not be there. He knows who his God is. He knows who's going to come and fight with him. He knows who is on his side. Now, I think that there are some of us who would sit here tonight and we kind of have this problem, this kind of a little mental thing goes through our heads. Well, you know, I think that this is probably good news and would work for so-and-so sitting over here by you because, you know, they're pretty good Christians. Pretty godly man, pretty godly woman, and well, I can see that working for them, but I don't know. When it comes to me, I don't know. I've got good news for you. Listen to this. This is so good. The word Israel in the Bible, as it relates to the people of Israel, means governed by God. The word Jacob, as most of you are familiar with, on the other hand, means trickster or manipulator. So when you read about the God of Israel in the Old Testament, the reference is to the nation